Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And it feels like it's been a really long time since I've said that, since I've made a proper video. So welcome back to all of us. I've been super focused on Petal Runner over these last few months. We've got our release planned for later this year, and I've just been getting lots of areas of the game and visual things of the game into a shippable state. So I wanted to take this opportunity while I'm right in the middle of doing this to kind of show you behind the scenes just what that looks like for me to take a room that is really just a gray boxed kind of bland, blank appearance and dress it up and give it its actual final identity. So this is one of those sort of areas. This is a ship called the Queen Violette. You know, every RPG's got to have an obligatory boat section, I feel. So we've got a good start up on the top deck here, but if I just bring you inside the ship for a second, we'll see that the artwork immediately devolves into just these basic plain tile footprints. So you can't tell it all, but this spot is meant to be a kind of catch-all entry area / kitchen or galley. Moving through here, we've got a little hallway that connects up to several rooms. This one over here is going to be the crew quarters, where maybe it's got a couple bunk beds or something. Back out over here is going to be into kind of a navigation room, and this one's also a quest spot, and that's why we see that little hub device there. Those are the things that host digital pets in this world. And then coming out here, there's a pair of symmetrical hallways that lead down into the engine room. Now, it may not look like much, but hopefully you can feel how even just this basic footprint is actually sufficient in how we're able to establish the functionality and the flow of this area for like an alpha state of the game. But obviously it doesn't have any kind of real identity yet, and that's going to be an essential factor in what the final experience is like. And where I want to start with all this is to actually detail just this little hallway right here. The loose idea that I've got is that I want to blend in some visuals that make the ship's interior feel like the interior of a submarine, like just kind of that dark and enclosed space. Lots of pipes and hand wheels and gauges and all that sort of stuff. And just a second ago, I described a submarine as being dark. Is that the case? Maybe they have like bright lights, but I'm imagining, you know, that it's dim, right? Let's go with that. So what I'm doing here is just drawing on top of a screenshot of the room, of the tile footprint. You might notice that I'm working in colors that are just slightly brighter than what the room looked like when we were in game. And that's because we have a lighting system that shifts the color palette down for us if we want a room to be darker, like if it's enclosed or it's nighttime outside or anything like that. But all the assets, they get prepared in the same default daytime color palette. In the game, the Queen Violette is located in a district of the city called Eda Harbour, and all the artwork in that area uses these pops of red and blue accent colors on top of the core pink and purple palette that we have for Petal Runner. So we're going to be working with this palette, which is 6 colors total, to detail everything around the ship as well. I think because I want that kind of dark, constricted atmosphere within the ship, we can get a lot of mileage out of mainly using the black and purple, and just kind of letting that shadowy look do a lot of the work in creating the vibe here. Lately, I've been obsessed with finding interesting atmosphere in these sort of smaller in-between rooms like this. I think probably because they're not meant to be these big showstopper kind of set pieces. So I find it particularly fun to really lean in on something that would otherwise be unassuming and really give them a lot of mood and character. And I think, you know, even if you're just briefly passing through a space like this, they can still be some of the most impactful or memorable spaces. Okay, so this is what the final artwork for the hallway is going to look like. You can see that I've done a lot of pipe detailing, just using little right angle connections overlapping each other in different ways, and then bringing in some of that blue as a metallic highlight on the larger surfaces. But right now this is basically just a painting that I've done in Photoshop. So to get it in game, what we should do first is break it down into kind of its most efficient assets that can be built up in Engine. So there is a lot of repetition going on with things like the walkway and the large pipes that are bordering the hall. So these pieces, instead of being like these giant, you know, sections of artwork that are getting put into the game, we can reduce them down into just their fundamental tile and then have that be repeated out. Over in GameMaker, which is what we're using to make this project, I've added that new artwork into my existing tile sheet. So right now it's just a matter of kind of reassembling it according to the blueprint that we painted out. This part really makes the level creation look super easy because all this stuff was obviously tailor-made for this exact room. But that's also why I kind of like starting with an easy room like this, because these foundational pieces, these tiles that we just made, they're going to help inform other areas of the ship, and I'm sure we'll find ourselves reusing these same tiles throughout the rest of these rooms too. The final bit of tiling for now is going to be on a separate layer, and it's these yellow tiles. These are what we use to indicate where the collision is. So this actually represents where the player character is going to bump into the walls and the doorways. So jumping into the game now, we can see all of this in action together, and we've now got the dark color scheme active as well. I also set up these doorways to be proper objects rather than kind of simple tiles. And because they're objects, you're actually able to have dimensionality to them. You can kind of pass through them and they'll cover you up. And this is something that occurs just based on the player's vertical position on screen. So this is already looking really moody like I was hoping, but we can get even more dramatic by applying a few cool effects that we've got available. You can see that I've already tried to paint in, just with the colors, the idea that there's some light spilling in from the doorway here. And what we can do further is to add an actual light object to enhance this look. Now this is something that we've kind of created a system for ourselves, where basically if we have a room that is set to the darker color palette, we can place in these white shape objects over any spot of the room, and it'll brighten the color palette back up to its original daytime colors. So it's kind of like a layer mask object. So I've dropped in this rectangle here, and that'll brighten that spot of the room where we can see the whole palette just kind of stepping up to those brighter colors, and you can see it's even brightening Cali when we walk through that spot as well. And the final touches for this hallway are just a couple animations. There's like the steam and the little spinning fan on the wall. These are little sprite animation pieces that I already had on hand from elsewhere in the game, and they just bring a nice bit of life to the room. Alright, now that we're warmed up with something easy, I think we should move into the navigation room, which is going to be one of those primary spots for the quest that's associated with this whole area. But before I take a screenshot of this and start painting over that, I want to make an adjustment to the room footprint itself. I think it just needs to be a tad larger than this, just to accommodate the scene work that we're going to eventually have in here. And I also want to introduce a curved edge along the wall, since this spot is actually sort of toward the front of the ship. And even though we're making it a little bigger, I still do want it to retain that tight and constrained, submarine feel to it. So I'm going to interrupt the footprint with a spot here where we can eventually put a table, maybe some control terminals and stools that can add a bit of detail to that spot. What's important here before going too heavy on the artwork though, is just that I test this out. I place some collision tiles in and actually see how this feels in game. I want to make sure that the player sprite actually has enough clearance to make it through these spots, and that it doesn't feel too frustrating to navigate, around this space. And I think that's pretty much feeling like I was intending. So let's grab a screenshot and get the artwork started. I'd like to add a bunch of details along the wall, kind of some screens and pipes and dials. But the challenge here is really in the way that the top-down perspective carries through that curve of the wall. It's creating kind of a complex, perspective or surface to try to have to detail. So I'm going to start this by making a little isometric style block that'll be set at 45 degrees on one edge, because at least that's a favorable angle to make pixel art at. And this is going to be a little display monitor. And at this 45 degree angle, I know that I can just plug this object into that same matching angle along the curved wall. And that gives us a nice anchor piece to detail from. So from there, if I'm being honest, I'm just going to kind of fudge in the rest of the details around that as kind of a mishmash of patterns. I've been finding that pipe detailing using sort of single pixel widths can be pretty forgiving. So I'm just trying to find different line shapes and little circles and dots. And I think all this stuff kind of patchworks together to give that sort of busy texture, the mechanical detail, the idea of control panels and stuff like that. I also want to bring in the same kind of detailing that we did for the hallway, where the walls are thickened up with kind of pipe detail. So we can get that going by using some of that exact tiling that we created earlier. And I also added in a few extra sort of custom pieces that are done in that same style. and that includes some of these sort of mesh grate pieces that can sit on top. And that'll be kind of cool for just giving some more layering and detail to the room, but it's not actually something that's going to interrupt the walkable area. It'll be sitting above the player. So here's the final appearance after placing all that in and adding in some lighting effects and other like blinking animations for the various panels. And the room just has its own kind of life and mood just with all of that going on. I've got 2 other rooms aboard the ship completed that I'll show you. And I wanted to mention that if you are curious about the game itself, we have a demo out on Steam right now. You know, even if you just want to see more artwork like we've been making in this video, the demo's got a lot of cool polished things that are already there to see as well. It takes place in a different district, so there's kind of different aesthetic to see there. So check it out if you're interested, and huge thanks to those of you who already have. Alright, I'll show the last 2 rooms as part of CRT Time, which those are going to be the main connection hallway and the crew quarters added into the mix now. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.